When Tama heard that Gola took Satu fishing, all that happiness that had been in his heart just evaporated, and it was replaced by sadness and anger all over again. That anger this time was pointed at Guru Mula, because he knew Guru Mula was going through with that plan to get rid of Satu, to try to appease the fire spirits by putting Satu onto the Fire Mountain beach. And he was angry. Angry not just because of what he was doing to Satu, of what Guru Mula was going to do to Satu, the chief's son, but also angry that Guru Mula had even lied when they were making the plans. Guru Mula had said that he would take him that evening, but now he had taken him in the morning instead. So that Tama could not have blocked it even if he had decided to. Tama decided this was enough of an unfairness, that he would go and tell Chief Meriden. He would warn Chief Meriden of what Guru Mula was doing. He'd had it with Guru Mula and his scheming ways. So he went back over to the village, and as the villagers were packing, getting their kettles and cooking mats and food supplies together, he found Chief Meriden and told him all that he had learned and his suspicions of what was going to happen with Satu. Chief Meriden's reaction was not what Tama was expecting. There was some surprise in his eyes, and the chief's face did become saddened, but there was also a determination as he looked at Tama and said, "Let him go. We will not stop it. The fire spirits are angry at my son. This is how it must be." Tama watched as Chief Meriden went around and found the 30 villagers and told them, "You can't go into the hills with us. Go be with the teacher." And then Chief Meriden told Tama, "Guru Mula and I have arranged that Guru Mula will stay on guard up at the top of the hill at his houses. From his balconies he can watch and make sure that none of the God worshippers try to escape from down at the teacher's house, which is right on the seashore, on the salt grass and on the sand. Guru Mula will have his other Islam teachers with him, and he will have some of the worshippers with him, some of our strongest men. So if for some reason those villagers do try to run and get up into the hills, they will stop them and force them to go back down. They will get what they deserve," had said Guru Mula. And now Chief Meriden told Tama of this plan as well. Tama and Chief Meriden made their way up into the hills, helping the people to transport their materials that day. Tama made a couple trips back and forth, and along the way his thoughts kept going back to Satu. What was Satu going through? What was it like to be there on the beach, right below a volcano that was still erupting out rocks into the ocean and had lava flowing down one side of it? What must that be like? And the more he thought about it, the more Tama decided he needed to see. He needed to at least maybe just get close enough to look and see what it was like. Certainly he wouldn't get in the way of Guru Mula, and certainly not in the way of the fire spirits, but it wouldn't hurt to look. So as the villagers all settled into their temporary lodgings up into the jungle hills, and darkness fell, Tama snuck away, made his way back down the jungle path, all the way back down to their village by the seashore, and out onto the rickety old dock where the boats would tie. And he found his boat in the darkness, and he had his hand out, untying it, in his other hand looking for the paddle in the boat, when another form emerged from the darkness next to him and said, "Ah, you are here too." And Tama was only partly surprised to see that it was Chief Meriden. Chief Meriden and Tama, without saying another word, got into the boat. And the two of them paddling, they made pretty good time, but it still took a little while to get even partway to the volcano. And as they neared Fire Mountain, they could see all the things Satu had seen. They could smell the smoke he had smelled. They could feel the burning in their eyes and the stinging in their nose. And as they neared to Tama, the mountain looked like a raging creature. It moved, the mountain would at times. It would shake and rumble, and you could feel the vibrations coming out through the water and causing the boat to jostle. Chief Meriden spoke. "Satu will expect me. We must go closer." Tama paddled closer. Chief Meriden spoke again. "I think the spirits are angry at me for allowing Guru Mula to put Satu on the beach." Tama thought to himself, "No, the spirits are angry at me for allowing it to happen. I'm the one who should be talking to the spirits. I'm the one who's always been the strongest in the witchcraft. I'm the one who should know what the spirits want. They're angry at me for not knowing what they want. They got closer. The beach was empty. Tama had not planned to go all the way to the beach, but Chief Meriden apparently had. And with his powerful strokes, the boat suddenly came through the breakers and right up onto the shore. And Chief Meriden jumped out and threw himself out into the sand, sobbing. And that is when Tama noticed off to one side the large crack that ran down from the foot of the mountain all the way through the shoreline jungle and out into the ocean. And in that crack, molten lava running down and the steam hissing up as it hit the ocean. And Tama's eyes widened as his mind recalled his dream. His dream, the dream that had made him so happy. The dream that had started off scary, the dream where he had been on this very beach and then there had been a crack just like this. A dangerous, hot, pulsating cauldron, and then there had been a boat and it had had little pink bird, Marta, with the yellow hair, and she had looked at him and held out her arms, and then he had climbed into the boat, and then there had been a bright light around him on both sides, surrounding him, and he had felt happiness and peace in his heart. And now that he saw the crack for real, he knew now was when he needed to go find Marta. Not before. The dream wasn't telling him to go talk to Marta on the sandy beach the previous day. The dream was telling him, when you see this crack, you'll need to go to Marta. He turned to look at Chief Meriden, who still lay, curled up as if his stomach was in pain on the sand, and Tama had to help him stagger and stumble back into the boat. And then Tama alone had to paddle for a while away from the volcanic beach until Chief Meriden could rise and control himself enough for the two of them to silently paddle all the way back to the dock. They tied up the boat. They got out. The first rays of light were already starting to barely come up over the top of Great Sangir Island. And Chief Meriden looked at Tama and said, I will go back to the village. There's nothing left. That's where I'll be. Tama said, I will go to Guru Mula's. I will watch from there. Chief Meriden said, do you think you'll be safe there? Tama said, yes, we are high up on the hill there. As the morning dawned, Tama arrived to Guru Mula's hut. His big house, actually, the tall one with the balcony, surrounded by the other Islam teachers' houses and the Islam house of worship. Guru Mula greeted him and said, look down below. Tama turned, looked down the slope where the Islam teachers' gardens were located, all the way out to where the sandy beach and the saltgrass was. And from the balcony he could see people gathering in the stone-walled garden of the teacher's house. He could see them all there. 30 villagers and a few others. And as he looked, Guru Mula said, it's a good thing Chief Meriden told me to be here. They would run for it otherwise if they didn't know I was watching them. They're in big danger there. You know, I have heard that sometimes when a volcano erupts, a large wave of water comes afterwards and it will rush up onto beaches. It'll erase them from existence. And Tama remembered stories he'd been told by his grandfather of a time many years before when there had been an earthquake. And after the earthquake, what his grandfather had called a great wall of water had rushed up and wiped out many people who lived along the shore of Great Sangir Island. Tama remembered that now, and he knew that what Guru Mula said was truth. But as he thought of this, he heard something very faintly drifting up from the shoreline way down below. And as he listened, he could make it out, this song coming from the singers on the sand. Sarga, it was hard to hear over the booming thunders that kept rocking from the volcano. It was hard to hear over the crashing of waves splashing up on the ocean. But he could just barely make out that hymn, that first song that the teacher had sung when he had arrived to the island 6 months before. And Tama thought about it. He thought about those words now. A God as big as a mountain? A God who could make a wall? A wall that could not falter, could not crumble? And he felt that pulling at his heart again. Tama did. That same tugging inside of him, pulling him down towards the beach. It was pulling him, but he blocked it. He was blocked in his head and in his heart by doubts and by the sadness of knowing that Satu must have perished on that fire mountain beach, must have died when the crack opened up. He must have fallen into it and been burned to death. Tama could not respond to that tug on his heart now. Tama thought to himself, the fire spirits don't care about us. They don't care that I and Chief Meriden went and tried to rescue Satu. They don't care that I would give my own life right now if I could just see Satu one more time standing as he did in Guru Mula's hut when they called that council to try to force Satu to change and worship Allah. When Satu stood there, calm, head high, not a trace of anger in his face, smiling as he said, I must go. I'm never late for the singing. Tama wanted to see that again. He wanted to feel that again. And then Tama's mind went back again to that dream. The last time he'd been happy with the crack and Marta and the bright light. And he looked to see if he could spot Marta down among the group of people singing on the shoreline. And he saw there, yes, he saw there the yellow hair. She was in the arms of the tall teacher with the red hair, the little girl with the yellow hair. And as he watched her, it seemed as if the fire mountain shook harder. There was more booming, and now it seemed as if a second opening along one side of the mountain began to leak lava as well. Guru Mula stepped up next to him. Yes, I tell you, it is a good thing, a very good thing, that Chief Meriden left us here. They would certainly be running right now if they did not know that we were up here, keeping an eye on, boom! The entire left half of the fire mountain exploded. Rocks the size of huts flew into the air. Tama could see, as if in slow motion, hundreds of trees being thrown like spears out into the ocean. And the shockwave of the sound of that explosion hit Great Sangir Island hard enough to cause everyone to stagger back a step. The hut, the house, the balcony shook. Tama watched as the ocean sucked away from Great Sangir Island in towards the volcano. And Tama ran. He leaped off the balcony, down onto the hillside, stumbling, tumbling, got his feet under him and ran, and he could hear behind him the voice of Guru Mula. Come back, you're a madman. Tama ran like a madman down that hill as fast as he had ever run before in his life. Breath completely sucked out of him, so that by the time he reached the salt grass, and by the time he hurtled over the stone wall painted white, and staggered into the garden where all of the Christian worshippers stood, he could only get one word out with his remaining breath. Run! He snatched Marta from the teacher's arms. Marta looked at him and smiled, as she always did, and threw an arm around his neck. He turned, hoping, almost praying, that he would have the energy, the strength in his legs to make it back up that hill before the wall of water that was rising up at the base of the volcano would reach Great Sangir Island. He never took one step back towards the hill, because the teacher's strong hand took him by the upper arm, spun him around, pulled him into an embrace, and said, "Stay here." Tama looked back out. The wall of water had built, and now it was moving toward the island. Tama closed his eyes. There was no way he could make it away now. He would die with Marta in his arms. He couldn't bear to see that, so he closed his eyes. But he could not close his ears, and so he could not help but hear the teacher and everyone else inside that garden sing. A mighty mountain is our God, a wall that will not falter. Tama hadn't realized that after the explosion of the volcano, everything else had gone silent. So silent that he could hear the wall of water approaching him, and he couldn't bear to not see what it looked like when he could hear what it sounded like. So he let his eyes open. He spared one glance for Marta, and then he looked, and there came the wall of water. It was over halfway now from the fire mountain to the beach. The wall had things in it. There were logs in the wall. There was a fishing boat in the wall. There were long strands of tall things that looked like trees. And Tama's mind somehow informed him in that endless moment. Seaweed. That's what the weeds look like that we see from above on the surface when we go fishing. The wave reached the beach. And Tama could now see inside that wall of water things moving. Things that looked like fish, but larger than any fish he'd ever seen. These were creatures from down deep who had been pulled up into the wave. There were large seashells. And as he watched the wave tower over him, taller than 3 palm trees, one on top of the other, he cried out, Tama did, "A wall that will not falter!" I told you this was a true story. You're not going to believe me. For as Tama cried out, "A wall that will not falter," the wall of water did. Not falter as in to stop moving, but falter as in to split. The wall rushed up the beach, over the sand, and as it reached the salt grass, and as it reached where that little short, man-made stone garden wall, painted white, stood, the wall split. The wall of water divided and rushed around the corners of the wall, of the garden wall, and past the teacher's house. And as Tama watched it, and he watched this wall of water around him, the sunlight shone through the wall, and the light was so bright. Tama and everyone turned to watch. The wall passed the house, and as it met the slope, it closed into a single wall of water again. They watched as it rushed up the slope out of their own sight, and then rushed back, splitting around them once more, reuniting on the sand, out to sea. They all stood, frozen in place, as a second wall, not as tall, rushed at them. and no one even flinched as that second wall came up, reached the stone garden wall, stopped, and fell back into the ocean. There were no more walls of water after that, just large waves. And Tama slumped to his knees, Marta in his arms, and he lay there, barely breathing, eyes barely open, until he felt someone's hand on his shoulder, and he opened his eyes to see Satu. How are you here? What is this magic? How are you here? Did the wall of water bring? No, the teacher. He came and he saved me yesterday evening. And then I stayed at his house all through the night. Tama, God's wall has saved us. God's wall has saved you, Tama. And as the teacher and the 30 villagers knelt to pray to the God of the mountain, the mighty mountain, Tama knelt with them. And after the prayer, they stood and exited the garden wall. It was difficult getting out. The teacher's property was completely enclosed by a wall now of driftwood, old boats, dead animals, large seashells, wreckage of all sorts. They clambered over those and made their way to the slope and looked up the slope. The gardens were gone. And the Islam teachers' houses and the Allah house of worship were gone. They turned to look down the beach at their village. All the huts of the village were gone. Some of the palm trees still stood. It was not until the following day that Tama and Satu left to go up into the jungle hills and find Chief Meriden and the rest of the villagers. They met them on the trail, Chief Meriden walking at the front, but oh so slowly. A look of absolute dejection on his face. A look as if his son had died, which is what Chief Meriden thought had happened. And when Satu called out to him, "Father!" Chief Meriden's face was as if he had seen someone resurrected from the dead. How can you be here? And he listened as Tama and Satu together excitedly told him all the events of what had happened. Chief Meriden heard them. And then without saying another word, without touching Satu, Chief Meriden walked past them all the way down, all the way to the beach, looked at the drift wall around the teacher's house, and sat on the beach. And Chief Meriden did not move for the rest of the day and the rest of that night. He just sat there, staring out at what remained of the fire mountain. But the following morning, Chief Meriden called for a council of the entire island. All the islanders had come by now to see what had happened with the fire mountain. Now that the rumbling had stopped, all the other villages around Great Sangir Island had shown up as well. And Chief Meriden spoke to them. This is what he said. Guru Mullah, the leader of the Islam teachers, took my son Satu to the fire mountain beach to leave him there as a sacrifice to appease the fire spirits. But look, it is Guru Mullah and his house that is gone. Here you see Satu, rescued by the teacher at great peril to his own life. The God of the teacher, the God of the heaven, controlled that wave, that wall of water. He controlled the fire mountain. Tama is alive because he loved that girl and her God. This is the true magic. This is the true worship. This God is like no other God. He delivers and saves. I choose, said Chief Meriden, to follow this God. And all the villagers from all the Great Sangir Island replied, For they knew that what he said was true. And over the next days, Tama became the teacher's helper, his right-hand man. He worked stronger for God than he'd ever worked in the old witchcraft. The villagers rebuilt their village. They had thought to build one up into the hills or some other place. But the teacher counseled Chief Meriden, build it here. The fire mountain is gone. You are no longer in danger. This is your home. And they rebuilt. And the huts they built were nicer. And they were kept cleaner. There were no pigs kept underneath the huts anymore. And the people all looked happy. And they sang songs the teacher taught them as they worked. The villagers offered to remove the mountain of driftwood and boats and logs around the teacher's property. But the teacher told them no. Leave it there. Let this wall be a reminder of what God has done. And they did leave it there. They left it there until many years later, when Satu was now chief of the village and Chief Meriden had died, and Tama was an old man, and some people arrived from a place they called Europe. They said they had heard that many years before there had been a volcano eruption. That they believed, of course, they could see the destroyed fire mountain, but they'd also heard that there had been a miracle associated with it. And they were scientists, they did not believe in miracles, but they'd come to check it out since they happened to be exploring that part of the Pacific Ocean. And when Satu and Tama took them to see the driftwood around where the property of the teacher had been, the European scientists could not help but believe it. And for years after, if you had come to visit Great Sangir Island, on every Sabbath day, you would have heard singers on the sand singing, "A mighty mountain is our God.